Allie Sutherland's family was worried that they wouldn't be able to pursue their dreams because they couldn't find quality, affordable childcare. She'll tell that story on the Midwest Flourish. Greetings, I'm Rick Farrant, and I'm your host for the Midwest Flourish. Our guest today is Allie Sutherland, who's the Executive Director of the Northeast Indiana Early Childhood Coalition. Welcome, Allie.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. I know that a chief focus of the Alliance is quality, affordable childcare, and you have a personal story about that, don't you?
I do. So I moved to Indiana, in August it'll be 6 years. And we moved here for my husband an opportunity with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I also had a position to run the Allen County Early Childhood Coalition, which was helping Allen County build capacity and quality for childcare, but I couldn't find childcare. I had a 1-year-old, and it was really difficult to find anyone. I was calling around. I had a list of about 60 places, and people wouldn't even take my name for a wait list, right? They said, maybe call us back in June. Well, it was August. So I was calling my employer saying, what do I do? I'd never even considered this being a possibility. So
Was this, by the way, a problem where you came from California, right? Was this a problem in California before you came here?
it's really a problem across the country. Yes, I think in California, I just knew more people there, right? So I knew who to call. But when I moved here and didn't know anybody, I wasn't tapped into that system, right? I didn't have friends or family or neighbors that I could ask for help in any of that way. So it's a problem across the country, but not for myself. It wasn't to the degree of I'm going to have to leave the workforce. Right. We had just bought our first house. We had made all of these commitments, and it was a month or so of, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? How, did we make the right choice? And it worked out in the end. We found some place, and it took us a couple times to really find the right place for our children. We had to change childcare a few times, but once we finally found that, it really spurred me on to say, it just can't be like this anymore. It was, all the times blending together, but we're in 2020 now, and it shouldn't be this hard. So for families, so what can we do, and how can we make sure that every family in Northeast Indiana who needs it can find affordable quality childcare?
So just talk a little bit about what the coalition is and what it does and what its goals are.
Yes. So the Northeast Indiana Early Childhood Coalition, I know we're not a short-named organization by any means, but what we really are the communities working together to ensure that every family who needs it can have access to affordable quality care. We know that's huge for our community's ability to thrive because people can't work without childcare.
Right.
So our goals are really to ensure that our communities can thrive by childcare is part of its infrastructure. So we started this work, it's all become one long project. So we started it maybe about 4 years ago to really work within the communities first, right? So we knew we needed community efforts in all of the 11 counties that make up Northeast Indiana to work on, are there enough seats for kiddos? Can the parents afford it? And do the child cares that are in that region, do they have the support they need so they can offer the curriculum, so they can make sure that children are ready for school and kindergarten? Do they have everything they need for that? So we're really focused on those types of
And
activities.
so when we're talking really quick, what ages
Yeah.
are we talking about that you're focusing on?
So we're really focused on the 0 to 5
0 to 5.
range.
And I know that I didn't ask you this question in advance, but when we're talking about quality, affordable childcare, quality is one thing, affordable is another thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with affordable.
Right.
What's affordable to one may not be affordable to another person. So how do you define affordable?
Right. So that is a difficult measure, right? But what we know right now is that families are spending 20 to 30% of their total income on childcare, right? Where we know that the U.S. Chamber has said no more than 7% of your income, right? So we're really looking at, what does that look like for our families? What percentage of their income are they spending? And how do we help them get closer to that 7%
Well,
number.
that's good. So, right, regardless of how much money you have coming in, you look at the percentage, right? So it's always going to be different for everyone. All
Right,
right.
right. Yeah.
So quality,
Hmm.
okay, are we looking at state standards, federal standards, regional standards? You could probably talk for hours about quality, but give
Right.
us a sense of some of the key points of what defines quality childcare.
Right. Well, so we know that the state has a system called Paths to Quality, and they've defined the certain levels of quality. But what we really mean, right, is we want children to have warm, responsive care. We want them to be a curriculum, and we want there to be a daily schedule where they're learning and where they're really being set up for success, right? So that we have adults who know about child development, guiding and taking care of children so that when they're ready for kindergarten, they can be successful. So what is in the early years that looks like play, but it looks like knowing what type of play really supports that, right?
So if you're going to have quality childcare, are the people that are providing that, um, do they have to meet certain requirements and who, are those the state? I mean, what are the requirements that people have to meet in order to say, okay,
Right.
I'm an official quality childcare provider?
Right. So if you're going to achieve the state level high quality, which would be PAS to quality levels 3 and 4, all of your teachers do have to have a certain amount of education. Right? So they've had to take in a certain amount of hours and training. And so they know about development and child psychology and curriculum planning and all of those pieces. So just like you would expect in your K through 12 system where teachers are licensed and certified, you get that as well in the early childhood systems.
And what about, I know I'm kind of like flying here off the seat of my pants, but what about safety concerns, right? There's a lot of concern out there about who's watching our children, which I assume sort of fits into quality or fits into this is an official, this is a child care provider that I can
Yeah,
trust.
absolutely. So, and that kind of goes back to my story, right? Is there's different So there's licensed care or there's unlicensed care. So licensed means that you have a business permit. So just like a restaurant would have a permit, right, and pass a health inspection, a child care needs to do the same thing. So they're following basic health and safety measures. We know that parents have options of choosing different types of care, and we don't want to make a blanket statement about any type of provider, but I'll use my own example as a person who didn't know anybody, if I were to choose an unlicensed care with someone I don't know, well, that person doesn't necessarily have a background check, right? I don't necessarily know where I'm sending my children. But if I'm sending them to registered, which is a category we have for childcare ministries, or licensed, which is typically like a family childcare home or a childcare center, then I know that they've passed and they've gone through those basic health and safety. Now, I also, when my son was just born, sent him to my parents. Right? They don't need to have a license, right? Right? Like I understand, but we really want to make sure that parents feel confident and can send their children to places where like they have all the information that they need. And like using my example, I came here, I didn't know anybody. I would have
Mhm.
had to send my children there blindly and blindly trusting strangers. And that is not a comfortable place to be in when you're a parent.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So we also know that quality affordable childcare, this is more than just providing a safe harbor for children. This is actually a workforce and economic development issue, right? And you sort of alluded to that because if parents have childcare that they feel comfortable with and they can trust, well, they may go out and get a job or they may rejoin the workforce.
Absolutely.
And I know a few years ago, I don't know how many years ago it was, Allie, you and I talked about it then, but a few years ago, you released a report. And I can't remember, the report either showed the impact of not having quality, affordable childcare or the impact of having it. I can't remember which direction it went.
Yeah.
But maybe you could share that data. And also, I'm wondering whether there's any new data that can help inform us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we called it the Work Willing Parents Study. And what we were looking at is like, well, how many parents are not in the workforce? Like we were really looking at that labor force participation rate and wanting to say, well, how many are not joining the workforce because of the lack of access to affordable care? And so we worked with GPMA, Thomas P. Miller and Associates, to look at what was that number in the region. And so in 2022, which was at the height of COVID, right? And I think we can all remember there was employment signs everywhere. It was at 9,000 families. And these were parents that would have joined the workforce had there been quality
And
care.
that's in Northeast Indiana,
Yes,
right? That's a
yeah, and
Northeast Indiana
just in
figure. Yeah.
Northeast Indiana. So we have updated those numbers. We've worked with Thomas P. Miller and Associates again, and done a mapping project that's on our website at the moment. So where we've looked now at the county level too. So we can see what are the work willing numbers in Noble County versus Wells and Adams County and Allen County, because that number is really important to that labor force participation. And we know that having people in the workforce is important to our revenues and our community thriving and really part of the infrastructure we need.
And so is there a comparison with the 9,000 figure and the new numbers? Where are we at on that now?
Yeah. So right now we're about 6,600. Right?
6,600,
Yeah.
6,600
In
people
the region.
who would work, correct? Would work
Yes.
if they had childcare.
Yes. And so not families opting to stay home and making that choice, but families that want to join the labor force but can't because there aren't options for affordable quality care.
Yeah. And we have, I don't know what the population is now, but I think the population of the region is something around 700,000. Maybe it's up to 800,000. But that's a total population. So that's not just, but in that respect, I'm just going to say 6,600 doesn't sound like a lot,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that concern you, or should we just be saying, any amount is something that we should take a look at?
I mean, I think that's a question that we have to ask our employers, right? We have to ask our employers, what is it like for them hiring? Are you finding the talent you need? And how many of those people could be impacted that way? Because when we first did that study, we looked at how many open positions were there. And I think at the time, the number was somewhere around 15,000 open positions,
we had a ton, and it's
Yeah.
less now.
Right. So we still want to look at, here are these open positions, and here's a ready, willing workforce that's being kept out. And I think the other thing that we're starting to look at and have conversations with employers with is, what does retention look like? Like maybe it's not necessarily always hiring, but how many employees are you losing? And what are those costs as we lose those
Right.
employees? Right?
Good
Because
point.
a lot of times it's the second baby that always does it, right? The first baby, maybe you can figure out some things, but now you have two and your expenses, are astronomical.
Well, I think it could also be a case of they want to get back in the workforce. They get
Yeah.
in, they think that they have figured out a way to do it, but once they actually do that, they realize that they can't make ends meet, and so they leave the workforce. I mean, that probably happens too.
Yeah. Or maybe they have an unreliable childcare that closes, well, it's Tuesday, I'm sick, you can't come. And so you have to call your employer and say, well, I don't have childcare, I can't come. And, lots of our employers, that doesn't, and how can that fly with any employer, right? That's really difficult. You can't have a reliable workforce if they don't have reliable childcare.
Yeah. Now here are some numbers that are big. Not to say that 60, it's important. I just sort of wanted to raise that point that I wanted you to tell me is 6,600 that we should be concerned with. So the Indiana Chamber did a report. It estimated that the state's economy loses, got to look at this, $4.2 billion a year due to childcare issues, and that includes $1.8 billion in tax revenue.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, from your perspective and your experience, do numbers like that ring a bell and compel decision makers and people of influence to actually tackle this?
I think they're starting to, right? I think that we're getting used to including childcare in infrastructure and including childcare in economic development, right? I think we've always talked about it as a part of education and brain development and our future workforce, but we haven't always focused on it as like, how is it impacting our current workforce and our current economy? I mean, and that's the thing. If you think about those 6,600, what do the revenues look like for them getting back into the workforce? Which is part of that work-going study that we did is we looked at if we were to get them back into the workforce, what does that look like for revenues? How much does the state gain if we got all of those people back into the workforce? How much do employers gain? And what do the wages for those families look like as well too, right? And when we look across the board at that and we see how much of a gain there is, and we looked at it at 10% of that 9,000, we looked at it at 20, 40%. And in every case, all three parties, right, the state, families, and the employers all gain because we wanted to see it's not inexpensive to get children into childcare. It's not an inexpensive investment for our state. So does it make sense to invest? Are we still gaining? And the answer, long story short, is yes. Like we are gaining. So when I see a number like this, it's like, absolutely. You have to think of all those people sitting at home, not being a part of the workforce, which means, we're not collecting those taxes. They don't have the extra money to put back into the economy. They don't, I always tell people, like, people would say, like, where are you going for spring break? Or have you tried this new restaurant? I'm like, no, I have childcare.
Hmm.
That's what I've done. So, that's where all of our extra money is going. And so what does that look like when you multiply that by the thousands?
Yeah. Tell me about, which I think your alliance is a part of. I could be wrong. Tell me about the Hoosier Milestones Alliance. What is that?
Yeah. So it really came about because as we've done all of this work, right, and we had been talking about what policy makes sense for the Northeast and proposing different things to our legislators, that, we had some ideas that people liked, but they're like, but why the Northeast? Why not everywhere? And that's when we realized we really need to be having these conversations, not just in our corner of the state, but across the state. Like we need to have better grassroots conversations. So
Who are these we that you're talking about?
the we, I mean, are the people that honestly that care about the early childhood in their communities, right? So they're coming together for various coalitions, alliances. They're the groups that are having these conversations, the grassroots efforts, right? So the boots on the ground people. So we started connecting with all of the other counties who are doing this, like really saying, if like whatever state your coalition is in, formal or informal, we need to start having these conversations together and we need to start aligning on what is it we're actually asking for. We need to have more clarity across the state. We need to really understand what it is we all want, right? Because what can often happen, right, is well, if the Northeast says this and the Southwest says this, and then it just seems like all the early childhood people can't even agree. So, how do you get policy to move forward? So, Hoosier Milestones is really the grassroots effort of connecting coalitions throughout the state. If you think of Northeast Indiana Early Childhood Coalition, we're connecting our region. Hoosier Milestones is connecting the state.
Okay, and it does. Is it essentially an advocacy group? Is
Yeah.
that what it
Yeah,
is?
it's really policy advocacy and education. So we're working with Policy Equity Group to really help us. They've worked in a lot of different states that have done some really interesting things. New Mexico is one of the ones I always like to point to that they recently got in their state constitution funding for early childhood.
Okay. Okay. And how
Yeah.
new is that? Is it relatively new?
Yeah.
It's relatively new,
Yeah,
right?
Hoosier Milestones has been working together for about a year. And we know, like, we've talked to other states. We've talked to states that have done some pretty big things. And we know it takes about 10 years. So we're 1 year in.
Okay. Um, so what has your coalition been here in Northeast Indiana? What has it been able to accomplish? And I know you have some program called TriShare Plus.
Yeah.
So maybe you can start there, but there may be some other things that you'd also like to share.
Yeah. So we're really focused right now on those innovations and programs that will help the actual issue, which we know right now, first and foremost, is affordability for families. So we know that that's a challenge for our childcare providers and our families. So we've been working and had proposed TriShare Plus, which TriShare is dividing the cost of care between an employer, grant funds, and the employee. So basically, what you're doing is for the employee, you're reducing their cost of care by 2/3. So we got this program we saw in Michigan. It was proposed in their state legislature. They had funds and a state pilot. So when we've been following their progress, seeing how that worked, and wanted to propose that here. So because it's about a year ago, well, where are we? It was April in 24, proposed to the Strategic Development Commission this pilot program, and we're funded $5 million to pilot this over 4 years. So we are working with different employers through our region to pilot this cost-sharing model for childcare. Now, the plus part is, well, we didn't want to forget our childcare providers too, that we know we needed sustainability for them, that they needed support in that part. So we developed managed services, which is helping them with some of the financial pieces, helping them bring in advice from a financial advisor, bookkeeping, different training opportunities, really helping them centralize that. Because each childcare provider, there's no overall system, right? They're having to do everything themselves. So what is it that we can support them with so they can then focus on what we want them to do, which is taking care of children in the best way possible?
Yeah, a couple follow-up points on that. The Strategic Development Commission was sanctioned by the state.
Right.
There's always a possible that will sunset. So are you looking at what happens when you don't have this wonderful pile of money to a program like have you looked at that?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it is
I'm
very,
not saying it is. We don't know, but
right.
it can always
Yeah.
change.
So what we're really doing is we're looking at the national landscape, right? And looking at more and more states taking on this cost sharing model, right? We know that's happening in North Carolina, in Michigan, in Ohio, in Missouri. We have other states reaching out to us as well, too. So we know that there is space to take this to our state legislators, which is where the advocacy work comes in as well, too. Why it's so important to build up the relationship with our policymakers to what boots on the ground, what's working.
So another follow-up question. I was going to ask a question about like what challenges do you face, but what is the trend that you've seen with employers getting involved in programs like this first, and secondly, people stepping up to actually provide the childcare? Where are we at on that?
So I'm taking a breath before I say this because it has changed drastically since we proposed. There are some changes at the state level with where childcare subsidies are and the availability that is really making the ability to provide childcare challenging at the moment. So I'll put that aside for a second and go to the positive side, which is with employers, we have really seen employers step up, and we have really not had to do a lot of marketing for employers to participate in the program. We have more and more employers reaching out to us and building as we go. Now, we really wanted to start with a true pilot model and start smaller and build, because we are building everything from the ground up. So what we are doing all the administration for the benefit, which means that employees come to our website, they apply for the benefit, we connect with the childcare providers, do all of those pieces. But we're starting with a group of 8 at first, and then we're expanding as we go. So we have a great group of employers. We're about to
8 employers.
8 employers,
Okay.
yeah, and different sizes as well too. So the other part of what we were doing here is we have money to evaluate the program for part of our grant, because we want to make sure that we're looking holistically. Is this the answer? Does this make sense moving forward? What are the benefits that employers gain? What do employees gain? Overall, what has our community gained by making this investment? So we don't want to just say, yes, this works. We really want to show that it works and learn that it works. And so we've seen a great response from employers. We're about to launch with our biggest employer. We're kind of working out the last details there, and that will be an interesting launch. But we've seen we have nonprofit and for-profit. We have smaller and larger employers. So we're really just trying to look across the board.
Okay, that was your hopeful one. What are
Yeah.
some of the challenges that at the state level?
Right. So the challenges at the state level right now is that the funding for childcare subsidies is just not there anymore, right? We had money during COVID that really kind of helped a lot of different families, and now we're having to scale back significantly. So childcare subsidies are available for working families who are at a certain poverty level. And the money for those subsidies is just significantly reduced. So we're seeing families going on wait lists that are, we don't know how long right now. I think it's somewhere, like we are somewhere at around 20,000 children on the wait list statewide. So those are the only public funding that any childcare receives, right, is from childcare subsidies. All the other revenue or any other money coming into a childcare provider is all from parent tuition. So now you have childcare providers who are trying to pay their staff, are trying to, buy the food they need to buy, the toys they need to buy, heat the building, cool the building. And the only funding they have is parent tuition. So if the public funding goes down, they have to increase their prices for families. And I think we all know where families are right now is they can't afford
Which
more.
actually just exacerbates the problem that you're trying to
Very
solve.
much.
Yeah. So I'm going to assume that the statewide alliance will be working on doing some advocacy work,
Yes,
trying to say, wait a minute here, we have a problem.
absolutely. And it's really about the storytelling of the effects that this is going to have and what are those investments that we need to make moving forward. And we need to think of investments into this.
Yeah. And so does that mean that I assume that your storytelling is going to be amped up and really
Yeah.
trying to find a strategy where it really reaches the people that it needs to reach, right?
Absolutely.
The Ann Casey Foundation recently released a report on child well-being, ranked Indiana smack dab in the middle at 25, which I guess is not that bad, but we'd always like to be number one, wouldn't we? And it dealt with a lot of things. It didn't really target, as far as I can tell, childcare, but it did target poverty, education, health, family stability. I'm going to assume that some of those, if not all of those, factor into the whole idea of if you have affordable childcare, you may actually be able to alleviate
Yeah.
or help,
Right.
however you look at some of these things. That would be right?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, think about getting people into a workforce where they can have health insurance, where they can afford their housing, where they can afford healthy foods. Like all of those pieces rely on a parent's ability to provide for their children. And if they can't work because they have children, how do they provide for those children?
Yeah.
Right?
What kind of peace of mind did it give you? We're almost at the end here. What kind of peace of mind did it give you when you finally found childcare? What kind of impact did that have on your own family stability?
I mean, all of the plans that we had made, right, became possible again, right? I mean, having a home for the first time, right? All of those things, being able to pay our mortgage, to be able to provide the life we wanted to for our children. Like without two-parent income, we weren't going to do that or be able to do that. So I think it's really, um, it meant the world to my family, right? And also, I'm really passionate about my work. I like my work and I like being able to help families, and I want to make sure I can do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've never noticed your passion, Allie. Yes, you are very passionate. Maybe you could let people know how they can find out about the TriShare program and
yeah.
other things that the coalition is doing. Yeah,
Yeah, so I think our website is the best place to go. So it's just www.neiecc.org.
say that slowly.
Okay, slowly.
No, the NEICC, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so Northeast Indiana Early Childhood Coalition, so NEIECC.org.
excellent, Allie. It's been wonderful.
Yeah,
Really
thank you so
enjoyed having
much.
you here, and good luck.
Well, thank you. Thanks for highlighting the issue. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Midwest Flourish podcast. Want to dig deeper or get involved? Head to marketingthemidwest.com to explore how we can work together to empower your community to flourish. Let's keep the Midwest momentum going and shape the future of our region together.